All right, welcome to another live episode of the Nature Journal Show. And today we're going to be looking at this book that I know many of you have sitting on your shelf at home. And to tell you the truth, when I first got this book, I thought I was going to do all of the exercises in it, especially some of these more polished illustrations. And the fact of the matter is, I have not done as many as I would like. So today, for the next hour, what we're going to be doing is one of these exercises together, and we're actually going to finish it. So the supplies that you're going to need today, it's helpful if you have the book, The Law's Guide to Nature Drawing and Journaling. This is basically the Bible of nature journaling with so many exercises from how to draw tree branches, landscape ethos, a whole lot of stuff about materials that you can use in the field, tricks for quantification, all kinds of stuff in this book. It is helpful if you have this book at home, but it's not totally necessary because I'm going to have it under my document camera so we can share my book. The other materials that you're going to need are going to be a basic sketchbook, whatever nature journal you're already using, one page, and a watercolor set. I am also using the John Muir Laws watercolor set. I've done reviews multiple times of this watercolor palette on my channel. And then you're also going to want a watercolor brush. I'm going to be using the one that I always use, which is the Aquash water brush. And then you're also going to need a graphite pencil. You could also use a non-photo blue pencil. That's the one that John Muir Laws usually uses. And then you're going to want a white colored pencil. So you could have one. This is like a Faber-Castell. I think these are both Faber-Castells, slightly different. This is like a white charcoal pencil, supposedly, and this is polychromo. So I think this is a watercolor pencil. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe it's just a regular colored pencil. And that's all the materials that you're going to need. So thanks for tuning in. I'm going to share the link for John Muir Laws' book that you can buy on his website here in the chat so that you can check it out if you don't have it. It is an incredible resource. If you could only have one book about nature journaling, definitely get that book. Speaking of books, on Wednesday, I'm going to be doing a show all about books for nature journaling, in addition to the usual suspects and the basic classics of nature journaling. I'm going to be talking with Ivea about a whole bunch of other books that are great for nature journalers. So I'm just going to check out the chat here, say hi to people that are tuning in. I see Andrew's here from San Diego. Good to see you, Drew. Marilyn from Oregon, and Zephy from Texas. Thanks for joining in. So I'm going to switch cameras here and start doing this exercise. Go ahead and vote if you haven't already. Some people on Facebook put in their preference for which exercise to do. Right now it's a tie between the shorebird and the lazuli bunting. So if you'd rather do this one, let me know. Oh, I see Cindy just tuned in and someone from Baltimore. I can't tell who it is on Facebook. So there's the lazuli bunting. This is just step by step. And to tell you the truth, this is going to be a little bit of a growth edge for me because I do a lot of sketching in the field and quick studies of birds, but I very infrequently do these long illustrations. So that's one option. And then the other option is that you can vote for is this, I think it's a curlew right here. So this would be the second option. And you can see how he used a strategy here to show the head in two different positions. So let me know in the comments if you would rather do this curlew or this lazuli bunting. And we're going to go step by step following John Muir Laws' book. Hi, Cindy. Hi, Lori. Hi, Becca. Lots of people tuning in on Facebook today. So let me know in the comments which of these you'd rather do. I'll probably just go with some of the first responses that I get since I don't see anyone commenting yet. Okay, Cindy's voting for the curlew. That's probably my what I'm leaning towards as well. Anyone else? Okay, another one for the shorebird. Oh, Candy just tuned in from Tucson, Arizona. Hi, Candy. I think if you're the same Candy, you just joined my Patreon. Thank you so much for joining. I'll be sending you some more information about that soon, Candy. I've just been a little bit behind on that. Okay, so it looks like 2 votes for the shorebird. So sorry, Lazuli bunting, a beautiful bird, but we'll have to do that one later. So let's dive into this. Hopefully you can see, if not the text, I will read the text as we go. All right, Marilyn, it looks like consensus on the curlew. Great. Okay, so I'm going to set up my sketchbook here, and I'm also going to, I didn't mention this in the materials, but I always like using these clips to just keep my page nice and flat. At least one in the corner there, especially if we're going to be doing some more watercolor later. And I like the way this one has this background. Look at the way he did the background behind it. That's really cool. I want to practice that. Okay, so I'll zoom in here a little bit more as I read this part so you can see more clearly as we go. But it's as usual with his bird drawing. I think he has changed his approach slightly in more recent years, but we're just going to follow what the book says. So starting with a posture line, and we will use this one sort of as our model, as if we were just working straight from the book. If you were in real life, you'd be looking for this posture line on the real bird. So I'm going to actually, one thing that he doesn't mention here is sort of creating a zone for how big of a drawing you're going to do. So I'm actually just going to kind of make, with my graphite pencil here, make a faint sort of zone here for where the bird is going to fit, about half of my page. And so this is what he's talking about with the posture line. So starting with that, if you look here at the angle of the bird, imagine if you saw this bird in real life, what is a line that would go right through it? And I do recommend drawing in your books. I definitely do a lot of note taking, and I use a lot of sticky notes in John Muir Laws' book. And you can draw on top of his drawings to get that idea of that posture line. So getting that, and that's really critical for the attitude of the bird. So put that in, and then the next thing is to go for an oval of the body. He calls this like a hot dog on a stick. So imagine the overall shape and sort of, in this one it's sort of teardrop shaped, but try to get that in its position on the body, on that posture line. And I'll tell you a little personal story. When I was a kid and I got drawing books as gifts that had these stages, I hated doing these, starting with these shapes and building a drawing up from there. I would just always skip to the final drawing and do it that way. That was not very good of me. And sometimes I wish that I had someone force me to do things the proper way and build this sort of armature, as it's sometimes called. Okay, so those are the first 2 steps. Third step is place the head, trying the best you can to match the distance from the body, match the size, and match the location. It is really easy to make the head too big and too far forward. So there's certain things that the human brain often does when looking at animals, and one of them is that we imagine the heads to be way bigger than they really are. Oh, Jose Jimenez is tuning in from Patagonia, Argentina. Bienvenidos, Jose. All right, so the head oftentimes is drawn too big, and the beak as well. So right here is our chance to draw that in and imagine where it is. I already made my circle a little bit too big, but as he demonstrates here, if you draw it too big, you can correct it. So give yourself now to check the proportions and make sure you're not making it too big relative to the size of the body or too far forward. Okay, so correct that if you didn't get it right. Okay, next, this is my favorite part, is we're going to visualize these negative shapes. So one thing you can do if you have the book in front of you is you can sort of just actually draw in here. And this is something you could do over a photograph as well, is draw in the negative space. So the negative space is what fits. It's what's not there. It's, if you imagine this bird were cut out of paper, it would be the leftover paper. So um, it's a really powerful way to notice these angles, because a lot of times our brain doesn't pay attention to these angles, but they're actually super critical for getting these birds accurately. Like if you notice, maybe in your mind, this would be more round of a shape, but if you actually pay attention to the bird, you'll see, oh, there's a very characteristic angle there. So getting a characteristic angle here and getting those right can be easier if we use these negative shapes. Oh, I skipped the part about the bill. So let's add in the bill. And he says it's easy to exaggerate the curvature of the bill. So let's go back to this bill step here. And he recommends starting with a straight bill and then just actually paying attention to where the curve begins. So like if you look at the curlew, this whole part of the beak right here is mostly straight. And you can see that he commented that with words. So draw that straight out and then start with the drop. Maybe right here. That was a cool trick. That was something when I read this that was new to me. So I've got this really basic stuff, and I'm very tentative right now with my graphite. And normally what I do lately in the field is I start with ink, and I would probably have not gotten these quite as accurate. It also is looking like my head is too far forward from my body. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust that now. So go ahead and make any adjustments you need based on this image here that we're drawing from. Or if you have the book in front of you or a photo of a curlew at home, you could work with that. I'm going to adjust my head further back a little bit and use my eraser. It's funny because I hardly use graphite anymore, even though it used to be my main go-to. It's easy to get stuck in this tentative stage with graphite. That's the danger of it. But if you're doing illustrations where you're trying to get very precise stuff, like if you're doing science illustration, sort of like what I interviewed Liz Clayton Fuller about several weeks or months ago, starting with pencil is a good idea. Okay, so now we can get to the negative shapes. I skipped ahead to that, stage 5, sort of one of my favorite parts. That's probably why I skipped ahead to it. So let's carve that in. And it looks like I'm just going to kind of work off of his drawing here, this forehead angle. And you also will notice that the forehead comes and attaches to the beak a little bit further ahead of the part under the bill where the throat is. So that's an important thing to pay attention to in different birds. And it's a little detail that we often get wrong if we're not actually paying attention. So I'm carving in the angle behind the head, the neck, front of the throat. All right, and then down here you can see it's a little bit of a curved shape. Okay, cool. Now, so we've got the angles of the head. We've got those angles around the chest, and we've got this part under the tail, the coverts, I think they are there. Now, let's see what he says to do next. Look for the corners and angles in the body shape, cut these in, exaggerating the angularity. So exaggerating these angles. This will counterbalance the urge to over-round that happens when you start with circles. Remember, the proportion circles are not the edges of the bird. So these are not the edges of the bird. They are only there to help you get the size of the head and the body. Okay, now this is an important part. Note, step number 7, note where the legs emerge from the bottom of the bird. Indicate how far down you see the ankle joint. So looking at the bird over here, where do you see the legs emerge from the body? And where are the ankle joints? And you'll notice that these ones are not in the same location. So that's an important thing to note. And it looks like he's just making 2 lines. It's kind of coming off near, this is where these angles can help you sort of locate things. One leg is coming off right here, and he's just starting off with them as straight lines. And the ankle joints are here. And if that's confusing and you think, wait, I thought those were knees, then that means it would be good to take one of his. He has several things in this book and in his other book all about birds, and the anatomy of bird legs is sort of counterintuitive if you're a human. So these are indeed the ankle joints. Okay, so that's number 7. So let's go over here to 8. All right, so now we're getting into more of what you'd think of as the real drawing and the line work. So he says, draw over your guidelines with deliberate strokes. You have solved many of the major problems in the drawing already. Note how I soften some of the angles a little as I come around the corner. The far leg is drawn a little more lightly to suggest depth. Okay, so there's line variation here, and I'm going to zoom in just so that you can see this, because this is important, and this is something that we often get wrong, especially if we're kind of new to drawing. And what you'll notice is that there's line variation. He didn't just outline this whole thing. You can see, and he mentioned in the text that, for example, this back leg is much more lightly drawn than this front leg, and the line is like darker in some places and lighter in other places, and that is something that will make your drawing way better if you know how to do that. I used to just draw and still have a tendency to kind of just draw an outline, a dark outline around everything. So let's do this part here, this number 8, and sort of just on our own kind of start putting in that line work. So I'm going to slide this book up a little bit further, so hopefully you can see this one if you want to work off of that one, or you can see this one as well. And what he's demonstrating here is how the bird might move its head while you're drawing. And I actually really like the way he did this in the final version, and this is very realistic and realistic of what you're going to experience in the field compared to something that you'll see in a field guide. So let's go ahead and do this drawing. I'll stop talking for a little bit as I focus on my drawing. Be careful with that bill. It seems like it's really easy to make that bill too thick when you're coming in after this. This would also be, if you wanted to, you could probably switch to ink at this point. I'm finding that my pencil lines are, see, this is why he uses, partly why he uses the non-photo blue pencil for the underdrawing, and then he uses a darker graphite on top. I probably should have just been lighter. I got a little bit too dark when I carved in those angles, and now I have to use my eraser. Let me know in the comments if you're using a non-photo blue pencil or if you are using graphite like me. Sometimes when I draw things in this way, I end up with a really scratchy drawing because I'm doing a lot of these sort of like short strokes. That doesn't, a lot of times that doesn't look as good as if you kind of do these more deliberate strokes where you're kind of doing these longer movements. I see that Suzanne's here. Hi, Suzanne. Jean's here for a little bit, but has to go. And it looks like Cindy's using graphite. Marilyn's using graphite, and Andrew and Antipodes, I think are using the non-photo blue pencil. Okay, you're all probably like way ahead of me because I am talking, and let me know if this is something you'd be interested in doing, like multiple Sundays for the live show, the live episode of the Nature Journal show, because I know that this is something that would be good practice for me. And it forces us to kind of, like some of these things in here, this book are so, they're kind of intimidating, and it requires like you have to sit down to actually go through the whole thing. And maybe doing it together would be beneficial. It looks like I got my head too big. I can already see my head is too big right now. So I'll just kind of erase that. So this line back here of the back is the classic example of a line that you don't really want to build up like that. So one trick is getting your hand in a position where you can do like a longer curve, and going for that sort of in more of like one stroke instead of like building it up. Like my tendency with my, and see, I'm kind of giving you the opposite example. My tendency is, maybe it's because the position I'm in here also, is to kind of do these short, scratchy strokes. And that's one of the sort of downsides of my drawings a lot of times. And when I work with ink, I think I'm better at doing these longer, more fluid strokes. And it's harder sometimes for accuracy, but a lot of times the lines look better. And if you get practice with that, you get a lot better. The other thing that's happening is I have my hand resting on this part. As a drawing right-handed, I have my hand resting on the spiral binding, which is never a great thing. Yeah. Okay. So one thing that you'll notice is that I started to draw in these lines that are indicating like where the feather groups are, and they're so dark that they're kind of competing with these other lines on the outside. So one strategy for that would be to like make those lighter. Similarly with this head in the second position, this could get confusing. And that's why he used this strategy here where he didn't color in this part, but he did color in that part. And that makes it a little bit more simple to see the head twist. I see that Andrew's pointing out that that head twist is like kind of confusing. I guess are you speaking from like a anatomical perspective or from trying to draw it perspective? That's what I'm wondering. Okay, so I think that's good enough for that part for me. If you want to, maybe you've done this already, add in the notes. I'm definitely going to add in this arrow, and I'm going to try to do it in the 3-dimensional way that he does. Always good to practice your 3-dimensional arrows to show this kind of head situation here. You can see I tried to do the 3-dimensional arrow there. It's fine if it doesn't look like John Muir Laws'. He's probably done like over 10,000 bird drawings, so don't be too hard on yourself. Okay, so that's what I've got so far. I'm just gonna keep going with it. All right, next step. So okay, number 9. Now the bird goes to sleep, bearing its bill and its feathers. Do not wait for the head to come up again. It might not. Just add another head on the back of the bird and keep on sketching. One reason why I chose this one is this bird, these waders, compared to the lazuli bunting, these are birds you're more likely to see standing one place for a while. So this is like more realistic, something that you'd actually be able to draw in the field. Okay, let's go to step number 10. All right, so here we go. Watercolor. Start getting ready for some watercolor. So he says, I like to start a watercolor by painting the shadows. Here I used a mixture of mud for my palette and Daniel Smith's Shadow Violet. Then I overpaint the shadows with the local color of the feathers. Here I mix the dull brown on the back, fading to orange on the chest. Okay, so what he's talking about is sort of the opposite of how we often do watercolor, or often told to do watercolor, which is starting with the starting with the light colors and moving on to the dark colors. But before I get to that, one thing I'm noticing about my bird drawing right now, and maybe you could check on this yourself, he mentions this in his other book that's all about drawing birds. But look at where the legs are, and I just corrected this angle because I thought that angle was better. But in doing so, I put this leg further back, and now what I'm noticing is this bird is totally off balance. So you can see there's way too much weight out here in the front of the bird. It wouldn't be able to stand this way. So I'm going to adjust that leg, because even though you might not notice that, part of your brain is registering that as inaccurate or as like unconvincing, because that part of your brain realizes what would be required for balancing that bird. So I'm going to adjust that. My line work is coming out really bad today. My hand's kind of like shaky. I think that's probably a little more balanced. Here, let me try again. Okay, maybe that's too far forward now, but at least it's this is the definitely the downside of pencils, graphite pencils. You can just keep messing around with things. If this was ink, I would be done with it already. Okay, so now let's go to the watercolors. Hopefully I'm not too far behind everybody else. And so when he says that he starts with a mixture of mud from his palette, what he means is he's using an area on his palette that already has sort of like a mixture of colors, and then he's using shadow violet. So shadow violet is right here. They all look really dark on my camera right now, but these are his two favorite shadow colors. So this is Bloodstone Genuine right here, and this is Shadow Violet, and these are the ones that he uses for most of his shadows. He really likes these colors. They're Daniel Smith colors, and they're both pretty, what's the word, granulating, so they can come out with some interesting patterns. So let's see. It looks to me like the shadow that he's putting in is actually just the dark parts of the foliage. Maybe this part of the head is actually a cast shadow. Jose's asking cuál libro es. Jose, es el libro de John Muir Laws. Es la llamada Biblia del Nature Journaling. No sé si es disponible en Argentina, pero ahí lo tienes. Creo que tienen una traducción en español, pero no estoy seguro. All right, so it does look to me like he's just putting in the shadow violet on the darker local colors. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to try doing it the reverse way. Usually when I do watercolor, I start with the pale watercolor and go from light to dark. But actually what I'll do is I'll show you the shadow violet by itself right here, because it's kind of fun. See, you can see here what it looks like by itself. You can tell I like these colors also because they're one of the colors in my palette that is running out. You can see this is an interesting way to analyze your color usage and pay attention and sort of modify your palette, is by paying attention here and seeing what is running out and what isn't. All right, so I'm going to do that like he said, and I'm going to mix it in with some of this just sort of mud, as he's calling it here. A little bit of shadow violet. I don't think it needs to be that dark because what he's doing doesn't look that dark to me. So I'll test it out over here. That looks about right in terms of darkness. So I'm definitely noticing this cast shadow here where the head goes down. And I think he might have exaggerated that. Sometimes he does these bird drawings for his book, partially from memory, because he's done so many. So he has an idea, and this could be you as well. If you've drawn enough of these birds or watched things enough, paid enough attention as an artist, then you kind of know where the shadows should be. And he might have done that one to exaggerate the way that the head is turned there. And then you can also see he also has this leg is a lot darker. So this is probably like sort of backlit almost, this bird, which is very likely when you're looking at these at sunset. And I think he was watching this bird at sunset. Okay, so we've got that in, and now we just need to wait a little bit. And he's mixing a dull brown on the back, fading to orange on the chest. So what I'm going to do is I think I'm just going to use this Monte Amiata natural sienna. If you have any other kind of natural sienna, that would be a good choice here. And then I'm going to sort of just dilute it or mix it in with that shadow color I just made to make it a little more toned, as in less saturated. And I think that's going to work. Let me test that out. That looks close enough to me. It looks almost like he has a little bit of like a pinkish color. So I'm going to mix a little bit of pink and orange. I'm using like a quinacridone gold. Even if you don't have the same watercolor palette as me, you probably have a quinacridone gold and maybe like a quinacridone pink. So I'm going to mix those two together and have those ready as sort of my orange color right there. I'll put it here so you can see. So that's a little bit more on the saturated side. Okay, so now I think this is dry enough, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the that sort of orange color and put it in here on the chest like that, just really lightly. I'm going to clean my brush. My little area where I'm cleaning my brush isn't visible to you right now, but I'm cleaning my brush, and now I'm going to pick up that more dull color. And while this is still sort of wet, I'm going to come in here on top of it, and I'm going to come in on top of all the shadow violet as well. So watch, I'm going to come in over everything. Maybe I went over the orange color a little bit too much. And I went outside of the lines a little bit too. Okay. All right, so 10, 11. All right, perfect. While this is drying, we can add text. So he says, if your drawing starts to feel like a precious art project, pop it back into the realm of field notes by annotating it. Once you have words on the page, your brain will treat it like the record of observations that it is. This is such a powerful trick because by putting notes down or using arrows like this, it does really make it so that your perfectionist, artist, inner critic self is not going to like get in the way. So I'm going to go ahead and write in basically the same stuff that he wrote. So I'm going to write Bill, mostly straight. Feel free to add in your own words here or arrows, whatever you want, your own style. I'm going to put down numbers here. So this is like position 1. Position 2. And then I'm going to write the word switch inside of here. Switch. Position 1, position 2. And then let's see, tertial. He named some of the feather tertials, and what's the other one? Coverts. Okay, so you can see I just added in little scribbles there, but that sort of takes some pressure off of the drawing. I already like the look of it better. You can see he has his metadata down here too. That's kind of cool. Okay, so all right, so step number 12. Once the base coat is bone dry, I add details with the tip of my brush, streaks on the head and chest and back. Then I add bars across the stripes and onto the flanks with fine strokes. I am not adding feather by feather detail, just suggesting the sense of the plumage. So look at how he does this testing of the colors and detail texture off to the side. So go ahead and take a moment right now over here, sort of like what I was doing here. you can test what these different patterns could look like. So maybe using your brush in a different way. How could you capture the bars? Like you can see my brush is really flattened in one direction, really sharp, and really wide in the other. So I'm going to try to see if I can make those thin bars on top of this little color swatch that I have there. While I'm at it, I'll make another little color swatch like that. That's bigger. Whoops, too much water. That's going to take a while to dry. But if you have these over on the side, you could also do this on, like, I carry extra paper here on my watercolor palette, and I can do color tests here. And the cool thing is if you use this to clean your brush as you do your painting, you automatically will have these under layers of your painting that you can then test the next color on top of it and see if those work on top of each other. Because a lot of times the colors will change depending on what they're on top of, because watercolor is transparent. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and just go for it here with these darker ones. And I'm going to use Bloodstone Genuine mixed with some of this just mud in here. Maybe that's a little bit too dark. I probably should have preserved that color in case I needed it, but oh well. It's looking a little bit dark, so I'll take some of it off. Actually, that's probably fine. Okay, so now I'm going to come in here and do these, my brush tip shape. You can use your watercolor palette to shape the tip of your brush. So you can do this on the paper also. But if, for example, I was just mixing color and then I lift my brush up, look at the shape of my brush. That's not necessarily the shape that I want. So what you can do is you can, on a separate piece of paper or on your palette, you can like roll your brush to make it really pointy, or you can splay it out to make it more flat and broader. So I'm going to check my brush tip configuration. That looks good for this, but see how it's beading up? There's a little bit too much moisture on it. So I'm going to take some of that off, come in here. All right, now it looks like these other ones have a little bit more of that red color. So I'm gonna mix a little bit more of these warm colors in. And now I'm gonna make my brush tip as fine as I can, as pointy as I can, and come in here and do these streaks. It looks like he made that part darker there too. Or my shadows aren't looking as dark as they did before. So I'm gonna have to come back and adjust those. Then it looks like there's these ones here. Whoa, mine came out a little bit darker than I wanted. Okay, remember these are the parts that are easy to overdo because it's kind of fun painting these little tidbits. I'm going to go ahead and add some more color to my legs that I didn't get before. So you might be tempted to paint in that part of the head, and I would recommend against it just because then it'll look like you have a two-headed bird and there won't be that sort of emphasis. I'm going to come in here. Maybe I shouldn't do this while it's still kind of wet, but be a little risky here and put in these darker darks on the head. And okay, cool. So let's see what he's telling us to do next. I'm going to zoom out a little bit on the book and the page here. Okay, so next he says, water does not have to be blue. Give yourself the freedom to paint the colors that you see. Water reflects the colors of the sky and whatever is around, creating infinite possibilities. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start doing this background part, and I think this will be really fun. I love this. way that it looks in his illustration here. So choose a square and notice how he made it so that the bird is overlapping the square. Don't do a square or rectangle that completely goes around the bird. I think won't look as good. So I'm gonna go ahead and just use my pencil to draw on my frame, and I'm gonna make it so that my words kind of match with it. It would be, this is the thing where sort of composition makes an impact. So you can see like his words are either outside of the color or they're inside, or they're overlapping in kind of like a clear way. They're not like a bunch of words ending right at the edge of this. That would look bad. So similarly with mine, I also don't want the edge of my color to line up with this right here, because that's a major line on the bird, or right here, because that's another major line on the bird. So like this would maybe be a good spot, or maybe like a little bit further out here, or maybe just enough so that it sticks out there, if that makes sense. And there's a name for that rule in composition where you don't want different lines like overlapping with each other. It creates confusion to the viewer. Okay, so I'm gonna come in and see that now the problem is I'm gonna run to the words out here. Maybe I will try to go straight through here, but not mess it up. Okay, straight up here, straight down here. And I'm gonna take it all the way down here. And I'm gonna end, I'll end in here a little bit. No, that's not big enough. I'm gonna end here. Okay, so I'm going to start with this background color, and I think I'm just going to mainly use diluted quinacridone gold. Is that what it is? Quinacridone gold. One of my favorite colors. There's a lot of different versions of it. Daniel Smith is definitely not the only company that makes it. And I'm just going to I use this color for so many things. It's one of my favorite colors. I've refilled it. Next time I refill this palette, I'm probably going to make the quinacridone gold bigger because I use it so much. And it's really different when you dilute it a lot. So I'm going to dilute it a lot. It looks like he has a little bit more of like a pink color mixed into the quinacridone gold. And so I'm going to come in and I'm going to do that over the whole background. And then I think what I'll do is with these numbers and this arrow, I'll paint those a different color on top later. So I'm going to make a big enough wash here that I can do this all in one go. Because when you're doing like a landscape like this, or sort of like a water scene, you want it to be all in one fluid pass. Maybe a graded wash. Like a graded wash is where it fades towards one end, but you definitely don't want to have like a lot of brush strokes in it. So this is where it's helpful to have your brush flowing with a lot of water if you're using a water brush, or if you're using a traditional brush, to just make sure it's pretty wet and loaded with a lot of paint. I might even just go over these legs. I don't think it's going to be a problem. Sometimes being able to go over something like that allows for you to not leave brush strokes, because brush strokes going up to the edges of the legs will make it stand out. That's how I painted it. Okay, so I'm actually going to, I'm about to start skipping out of what he says to do. Okay, never mind. I won't do that. Okay, 14, he says, more notes, add more notes. As the bird became more comfortable, it hid one leg up in its feathers. Some observations are more easily recorded with written notes, others with a sketch. So this is the part where words are better for some things, and images are better for some things, and numbers are better for other things. So I'm just going to write hid one leg and balanced on one. It would be hard to change this one that we've already drawn, but what I'm actually going to do is I'll just do a simplified sketch of the bird, almost cartoonish, balancing on one leg. And maybe I'll turn that into a silhouette, so I'll just darken the whole thing. kind of get the idea there. Okay, so now I think my color is dry enough here to come in and start doing some of this. So let's see what he says. Oh, he's talking about metadata. Add metadata, date, location, weather, time. This turns the drawing from a picture to scientific notes. So I didn't really leave metadata, but let's just copy his. I'm going to do mine sort of the style that I like to do mine, which is in like a square. I'll darken that. I haven't been working with graphite much lately, so it's kind of fun, kind of not fun. All right, so metadata. Coyote Point, we'll put the location up at the top, Coyote Point. And I'm going to put like a sun here, even though he says it's partially cloudy. And a cloud there. And he's saying San Mateo, California. I'll just put California. And I like to put my temperatures approximately, I'm going to say 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And wind, I like to draw the wind. Oops, that looks like the approximate sign now. So light wind. And then I like to put who I'm with. So sometimes I'll draw these little drawings of who I'm with. And I'll just put initials for people. And who else is here? Jose Jimenez and CL. So that's just an example of how you could do metadata. You don't have to do it the same way as I did. Okay, so now while we did that, this background was drying. So you can see my color didn't really match his. His has way more pink. I'm not sure which he's using. It's similar to what he's using for this. I kind of wish I knew. I could probably figure it out by experimenting here for a while. I have tested all of these colors a lot. I'm going to erase some of these background lines here that I don't need. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is do this last part. So number 16, bold, dark mud flats give solidity and they contrast with the light water. Make this mud too light and it will feel like smudges on the paper. I use Daniel Smith Bloodstone Genuine, one of my favorite colors. I told you it was one of his favorite colors. So Bloodstone Genuine is this one right here. So I'm going to go straight from, it looks to me like he went straight from the palette, straight from the color onto the page. He didn't like dilute it in the mixing area. It looks like he went straight to the page. See how that matches? So, but then he has these paler ones. So I don't know if he did that first. Also notice he has these little shadows. Like I said, the bird is backlit. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to start with the paler ones first. So let me just make this color a little bit lighter. This is the Bloodstone Genuine. Make it a little bit paler. Test that out. Okay, so first what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this. I'm going to draw sort of mud flats in the background because things that are further away will look paler. I'm not going to put them in exactly the same places that he put his. And then I will do the foreground ones with the light color, but I think I'm just going to come down and do the dark color while there's, oh, he left white spots. See, we didn't do that. I forgot to do that. He left little white spots in here. Maybe we could do that with our white pencil or gouache or something like that. But it already sort of looks like water, don't you think? So now I'm going to go straight and get it straight from here and put it in for these sort of darker ones. All right, that's really dark. It's a little bit, now what you might want to do is look up at the rest of your illustration and see, like, is this way too heavy? It looks to me like it kind of almost is, but I'm not going to worry about too much. You might be able to come back in and darken things up here, or maybe like touch up some of these lines if you really wanted to get, you know, very precise and artistic about it. So I think I'll just come in here and maybe, you know, make part of the, ooh, maybe that was a bad idea. Part of the head like a little bit darker there, or like something on this leg a little bit darker, just kind of balancing out. See how I'm sort of just trying to balance out the illustration with the darkness that I created down here. And I'm gonna even, oh, now I'm starting to fuss with it. Watch out, don't fuss with it too much. I'm gonna darken just some of these plumage marks here, because I don't want this to be the thing that stands out more than anything else necessarily. So I'm gonna add some of these, darken these plumage marks here. This is where it's just kind of practicing the artistic part. You can direct the attention of the viewer, and this is where science illustration can be more powerful than photography, is you have more control over where the viewer's eye goes, because you can mess around with these things. Okay, so now I'm just going to, oh, I kind of wish I had a little bit of a shadow over here. There we go. These kind of lines, you can overdo them, but they are good for suggesting water. The human eye identifies that as water. Okay, so now I'm gonna actually use my blow dryer to speed this up a little bit, but I'm gonna mute my microphone while I use my blow dryer so you don't get blasted by the sound. The other thing that you could do while this is drying is you can maybe add color in somewhere else. So I'm actually going to come up here and add a little bit of color to these letters, numbers. And I'm going to make that one a slightly different color. I'll make it more like yellow. This also, having these sort of more emphasized up here, also balances out all of that weight that I have down here. So having these a little bit more emphasized up there helps. As you can see, I've taken out my opaque white tools. So none of these are perfect, and some watercolor purists won't use any white except for the white of the paper. Sometimes reserving the white doesn't work in the field. So these are the two tools that I prefer. One is the Uniball Signo, and this one is I think this is, you have to get the, there's like two different sizes of this. I'll post the link. But these are basically the only two opaque white tools that I use. Sometimes I use gouache, but it's also not the best. So the Presto Jumbo correction pen right here is good for big stuff, and the other one is good for fine stuff. And these are the two that I use. John Muir Laws has reviewed them as well. But yeah, so those are the two that I use. And what I'm going to do right now is, since it looks like he reserved the white in some places and it looks really good, so I'm going to kind of do the same thing with mine. And what I'm going to do is, I'm noticing on his leg he has a little bit of white, and then down here in the reflections he has a little white. And this is another time when it's really good to have this spare paper, or maybe on your book, like right here, you could test the white and get it flowing right there. One thing you'll notice is a lot of times, like with the Uniball pen, is it is ballpoint. So what that means is, I don't know if the camera can focus on this, but what that means is, you'll see there's these two, on these first two lines, there's those little bits where there is a negative space in the middle of the white line, which is really annoying. And what it means is, a lot of times you have to just do a single pass and it might not be perfect. Little dots often come out perfect, but one thing you definitely don't want to do is start going back and forth like that. See where I went back and forth? See how it's almost like it's erasing itself? That's one of the downsides of this pen. And you can often get a better line if you don't push really hard. When you push really hard, it does that thing where it scrapes it away in the middle. You see the difference there? So that's where I pushed really hard. And now I'm going to do one where I push lightly. See that? So a little bit of a challenging tool there, but I'm going to go ahead and do my best with it in this painting. All right, so I'm going to go here on the leg. This is the other thing you can really easily overdo. Oh, it's not flowing very nicely. So I'm going to try not to overdo it. I already had that issue with the sort of negative space in between. And I'm actually going to use the jumbo correction pin for the other one. So this one, you're supposed to shake it up. I think maybe I messed up. This stuff can be messy, so you definitely want to test it on scrap paper first. So you squeeze it to get it flowing, and then once it's flowing, it should come out fine. And you can see how it comes out wider. A lot of the same problems as the last one that I just showed you. You can see that if you push really hard, it will scrape away, and you can't just build it up on top of itself very easily without creating a lot of three-dimensionality and sort of like mess. Also, this white probably doesn't perfectly match the white of your paper. So let's see, where would there be reflections? Maybe there'd be a little one on the inside there. A little bit goes a long way, so don't overdo it. I might I almost wanted to put some on the black, but I don't think, because there sometimes would be a reflection on mud like that. But there we go. I'm going to leave it like that. So I could put a title in here somewhere, but I kind of like this. One thing I'm going to do, and this is something, if you're working from a book, could be part of your metadata, is mention the page number on the book and what book you're using. So I'll also mention that it's like the Nature Journal Show. So I'll put the date. I'm going to do it down here, not the top. So it's, I think it's the 12th, 9/12/21, and Nature Journal Show. Show practice. And I'm just going to say from JML, John Muir Laws book, JML's book. And I'm going to say page 198 through 199. So this type of nature journaling is what I call home study or homework or studio work or whatever. This in some ways is like, I would consider this like practicing for nature journaling. You're not directly observing something in nature. You're studying from a book, and it is art. Obviously it's art. But it's not really nature journaling. This is practice for nature journaling, in my opinion. So if instead we were like looking under a microscope at my skin and nature journaling that would be nature journaling because we're directly observing something. In this case, we're observing something or studying from something that's already been done by someone else. So even though John Muir Laws is awesome, we're just getting what he saw. So this is sort of just practice. That's one thing I want to point out. And I think I shared most of the materials that I used here in links. And let me switch my microphone. I mean, my camera here. So you can see the page that I ended up with. I'm okay with it. It's not amazing. It's not as perfect of a bird illustration as the one that John Muir Laws did on page 199. But I'm really glad that we did this practice today. And I want to do more of these in the future. So maybe like once a week, we can choose a page from his book. Such a great book. I posted it in the comments and I'll also post it in the video description. So if you don't have this book already, I highly recommend it. Otherwise, let's just keep practicing like once a week or something like that, doing exercises from his book. So if there's any other exercises in here that you've been intimidated by and have been wanting to try but haven't done yet, like maybe this shiny salamander or something like that, let me know in the comments what exercises from the book you most want to do, and we can do it together. Because I know that I haven't done most of the ones in here because they are kind of intimidating. You have to sit down and like go through them. So thanks for joining in. Thank you, Cindy, Becca, Jose. Good to see you all. Marilyn, Suzanne. That was really fun. And more videos coming soon. This Wednesday, the video is going to be a conversation with Ivea about best books for nature journalers. So besides these ones, the classics, we're going to be talking about other books in the realm of art, in the realm of philosophy, in the realm of nature studies and science that are all good for nature journalers to have. Thanks, Zephy, Suzanne, Marilyn, Cindy, Jose, Becca, all of you for joining in. Good job nature journaling. Now get yourself an ice cream or a chocolate or a glass of red wine or something because you deserved it. All right, bye everybody. Oh, there's multiple Cindy's. Bye.